Welcome back. Already this hour, we've shown you the latest facts and figures on the coronavirus. We've spoken with the mayor of New Rochelle, New York, which is one of the hardest hit areas in the country regarding the virus. And we've also discussed the economic hit it's caused with the top market pro. In this segment, the politics surrounding the outbreak. And if this outbreak worsens and this White House's handling comes even more into question, will there be a political price to pay for Donald Trump? Former Republican Congressman from Illinois and one-time presidential hopeful Joe Walsh joins us now. Congressman, thank you for the time, as always. And you know, we're all following, obviously, the coronavirus. And this evening I've spoken to everybody from both the medical world, the political world, in terms of people on the ground dealing with this in their constituencies, and also even from a historical perspective. But in terms of where we are right now, and I've never seen a more siloed time in American politics, one thing a virus doesn't do is pick people, whether they're red or blue or, you know, who they voted for. And you want competency and transparency. Those are two things we haven't seen out of this White House, particularly this president. Is this a tipping point for some folks? Forget who wear the MAGA hats at the rallies, but for whatever percentage who voted for Trump in 2016, because they couldn't go that far with Hillary, but now might say, wait a minute, this is the first real crisis this president's had to deal with, and this is what we're getting.
Yeah, Richard, look, good to be with you. Look, Donald Trump is unfit, and I think the majority of the country knows that. And this coronavirus, I think, is just the latest reminder. I mean, what an odd situation. Here we have a pandemic, a burgeoning pandemic, and we don't want the President of the United States even talking about it. Every time he opens his mouth, he makes things worse. Every time he opens his mouth, he makes Americans less safe. I mean, think about that. We're talking about the President of the United States, and the nation would be better off if he didn't say squat. It's a pretty scary situation. And Richard, I'll only add this. Look, Trump's a bully and he is incompetent, and he can bully the Fed chair to cut rates, and he can bully his attorney general to get his way, but he can't bully a pandemic, a virus. So it'll be fascinating to watch.
And I want to put this into political terms because obviously we know what's at stake in November. It's not just the presidency, but the House and the Senate as well. Your former colleagues, at the end of the day, we don't have the kits ready for the folks. The president just yesterday said that, hey, we beat this thing. We've got this thing. We stemmed the tide. And at the same time, every reputable health organization, including the World Health Organization, says we're at a crisis stage here in terms of how to deal with this. I can go through all the different statements, but the point of the matter is, when folks have to go back to their districts or to their states if they're running for Senate or for whatever, do they stand shoulder to shoulder with the president? And if all of a sudden, like a lot of other world leaders who are taking hits for not being transparent enough, it starts to hit him too? Where do you think the level of unqualified loyalty from the GOP is to the president? I'm talking about electeds running for re-election, if this thing goes from bad to worse.
Unfortunately, Richard, I think most of my former Republican colleagues will still stand with him, which is, again, such a sad indictment of these times we live in. Again, the upside down world we're in, a rule of thumb for every American listening to us right now, you need to believe the opposite of what Donald Trump says. Every time he speaks or tweets about coronavirus, you need to believe the opposite. Look, I think Republicans right now are scared to death. Republicans in the House and Senate, any Republican up for re-election, they were counting on, Richard, it being Bernie. I mean, they were salivating at the thought of Bernie Sanders becoming the Democrat nominee. That was their only hope. Now that it looks like it might be Joe Biden, Republicans are panicking.
To that end, and again, you had a good sense of your constituents in Illinois. For the folks, I'm not talking the 40% in each, that would vote Republican or Democrat, no matter who the candidate is, but that middle, whether it's 10, 15, 20%, whatever the number is, for those who couldn't vote for Hillary just because they just didn't like her, But now they've seen 3+ years of the president, and it's Biden now instead of her at the top of the ticket. Do you think he's going to have a better chance than she will or not?
Way better, because Richard, now we've seen 3.5 years of Donald Trump. So now we've seen what it's like to have a horrible human being, an incompetent human being in the White House. Look, I was out on the campaign trail for 6 months, and I was talking to Republicans, moderates, and independents. And I can tell you, Richard, they told me overwhelmingly, most did, that if the Democrats nominate somebody like Amy Klobuchar or Joe Biden, somebody reasonable, moderate, they'll vote for them in a heartbeat. We've lost the suburbs. The women in the suburbs, moderates and independents all over this country, they'll vote for Joe Biden in a heartbeat over Donald Trump. And Trump knows that.
Congressman Walsh, it is always good talking to you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, my friend.
Up next, the eerie parallels between the deadly flu pandemic 100 years ago and the coronavirus now. An author of a really interesting best-selling book about the Spanish flu, he'll join us next to explain.